All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this presentation about arc length. This is going to be a fun presentation, but this is one that you're going to have to pay very close attention to so you understand the central concept regarding what an arc is and how that relates to angles and the measures of angles inside a circle. And so pay very close attention as we dive right into this. So before we get to these example problems, we have to talk about some vocabulary and we have to learn a couple of things. So in order to start this out, we're just going to draw a circle. And within that circle, we're going to inscribe an angle. Okay, so make sure that you're taking notes. This is a video you absolutely need to watch in order to know how to do this. Okay, so we inscribe an angle. And we need to talk about this angle. First, let's give it some arbitrary letters. We'll call this A, B, and C. Okay, so what is an arc? An arc is any distance around the perimeter of a circle. For example, from B to C, that's an arc BC. Here's another arc from B all the way to A. Arc AB or arc BA, and then here's another arc from C all the way to A. So this distance here, arc AC. And here's how we write this. So for example, if I want to indicate arc BC, then what I'll do is I'll write the measure of, with an M, arc BC, which we write with that little arc symbol over it. So the measure of arc BC. Likewise, this angle in here is the angle A. So we refer to that as the measure of angle A. And that symbol means angle. So this is an arc and this is an angle. Now there's a relationship between the arc and the angle. And this is kind of the crucial point. So pay very close attention here. This angle A, okay, the measure of angle A is equal to one half the measure of arc BC. And these are in degrees. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that you're given that the measure of angle A is 40. So if the measure of angle A is 40, that has to be equal to 1/2 the measure of angle BC. All right? So 40 is 1/2 of what number? Well, it's 80, right? So to make a true statement here, we'd have to say 40 equals 1/2 of 80. Because 80 divided by 2 is 40. And these are in degrees. So if this is 40 degrees, the measure of angle A is 40. The measure of this arc right here has to be 80 degrees. So sometimes you're not given this information. Sometimes you're given the other information. I'll give you an example. So sometimes you might be given that this is 40 degrees out here, and that over here it's 120 degrees. And you're asked to find this. What is this arc here from B to C? Well, you have to keep some other fact in mind. That the total angular measurement all the way around the circle is 360 degrees. So you have to say all the way around the circle equals 360 degrees. So if this was your problem, okay, and you wanted to find out what x was, that would be the arc length from B to C, you would need to take 360 degrees and subtract the sum of 140 and 120. So it'd be like 360 minus 40 plus 120. Well, let's see what that would be. 360 minus, and then 40 plus 120 is 160. And so we just have to do 360 minus 160, which would be 200, right? So that would equal 200. And so x equals 200. And let's make sure that makes sense. So they have to all add up to 360. So if x is 200, we have 200 plus 120 plus 40 has to add up to 360. Does it? Yes, it does. So if x is 200, what's the measure of angle A? Well, it has to be half of this arc length. So if the measure of arc length BC is 200 degrees, then A has to be half that. So A would have to be 100 degrees. Okay? So let's keep all that in mind as we move into our problems. The big key is that the measure of an arc is twice the measure of an interior angle. And the measure of an interior angle is half the measure of the arc. So just keep that relationship in mind as we move into this first problem. Now the math is going to get a little clunky, but if you just keep in mind what we just went over, then it won't be so bad. So here we're asked to find the measure of arc QS. So that's the measure of the arc spanning the distance along the perimeter of the circle from Q to S. And so that would be this distance here. And we notice right away that that distance is actually indicated by an algebraic expression, 20x plus 1. Okay? So we'll figure that out. We're eventually going to find out what that measure is. So first we have to find out what x is. We're also given that RQ is 21x plus 5. And we're given that this central angle Q, measure of angle Q, is 10x minus 6. So let's write some stuff out. Remember what we know. Remember what we know to be true. We know that the measure of angle Q has to be equal to 1/2 the measure of arc RS. Okay? Has to be this, whatever this is angle here, it has to be half the angular measure of this arc. So that's RS. Well, what's RS? We don't know. Okay? We don't know, but we can figure it out. Because whatever RS is, it has to be 360 degrees minus this minus this. Okay, so we're going to write this out. The measure of angle Q is equal to 1/2 open parentheses 360 degrees minus the sum of these two arcs. So we'll write that in here. The first one is the measure of arc RQ or QR. I guess we could write it like this, which we know, plus the measure of arc QS. So this is the setup. Now we have algebraic expressions for the measure of angle Q, and we have algebraic expressions for the measure of arc QR and the measure of arc QS. So we're just going to substitute in all of our algebraic expressions into this problem. But basically, all we're trying to do is find this measure, okay, of this arc by doing 360 minus this minus this. Okay? And ultimately, we're tagging that whatever 10x minus 6 is, it's equal to 1/2 of all that stuff we're about to do. So just keep all that in mind as we move forward. Don't let this math get in the way of understanding that you're just doing 360 minus the sum of two other arcs. So instead of writing the measure of angle Q, we'll write 10x minus 6. So we'll write 10x minus 6 equals 1/2, open parentheses, 360 minus open parentheses. All right. So now we're going to put in the measure of arc QR, which is 21x plus 5. And we're going to add that to the measure of arc QS, which is 20x plus 1. Okay, that goes in its own little parentheses, and then there's the bigger parentheses at the end to cap off that 360. So how do we proceed? Well, instead of getting lost in the maze of algebraic expressions, let's just focus in here. We actually have common terms, and so we can combine like terms in here. We have 21x, and that combines with 20x. And then we have 5, and that combines with 1. Okay, so we're just going to combine like terms. In this step, we're only combining the like terms inside that nested parenthetical expression. So we're just going to rewrite 10x minus 6 equals 1/2, open parentheses, 360 minus open parentheses. So we didn't change anything so far. Now we are going to change some things. We're going to combine 21x with 20x. Well, those add together to be 41x. 41x. And then we're going to combine 5 with 1. 5 plus 1 is 6. So plus 6. Close parentheses and close parentheses. Well, now let's zoom in and see what we've got. Okay. We need to get rid of these parentheses here. Okay. We got to make them go away. And the only way we can make them go away is by distributing this negative symbol to each term of that parenthetical expression. So once again, we're going to rewrite all of this stuff is not going to change because we're not doing anything with that yet. 10x minus 6 equals 1/2, open parentheses, 360. And now we're going to distribute, multiply that negative symbol, minus 41x minus 6. Now we're going to close that parentheses off. Okay. We're doing good. Okay. Let me just check our recording. We're still recording. Good. Everything's going well. Okay. So now what's the next step? Well, we can actually continue to combine our constant terms. We have 360 and negative 6 inside the parentheses. So once again, we're just going to rewrite all this stuff because we're not changing anything. And then we'll get inside the parentheses there. 10x minus 6 equals 1/2. And now what's 360 minus 6? Well, it's 354, right? So open parentheses, 354 minus 41x. Now what? Well, you now have 1/2, okay, up against this parenthetical expression. So in order to get rid of those parentheses, you're always in this war to get rid of parentheses, we are going to distribute, multiply that 1/2 through this parenthetical expression. And then we won't have any parentheses left in the problem. So as you notice this, look at how we've kind of pared it down. Each step, it's getting simpler. Okay. So we're going to start by rewriting 10x minus 6 equals 10x minus 6 equals, and then when we multiply 1/2 times 354, that's equivalent to doing 354 over 2. Okay. That's 1/2 times 354. And then we have minus 41 over 2x. And now we've distributed that 1/2. And so now all that remains is for us to combine like terms again. And so we have negative 41 over 2x here, and we have 10x here. And we've got, this is some whole number. It's an even number divided by 2. And then this is an even number. So we're just going to combine like terms now and isolate x and find out what x equals. And once we get there, we'll have some more work to do. But we'll just keep going. So I'm going to get x on the left side. And so the first thing I'm going to do I'm not going to compute what 41 divided by 2 is. I'm just going to leave it. Instead, I'll do plus 41 over 2x on both sides. Plus 41 over 2x. On the right side, that cancels out. Okay, cancels out. On the left side, we actually need to add that together. Okay, so we'll only do one step at a time. That was our step. And so now let's see what we have. We have 10x plus 41 over 2x. We're going to have to combine those together. And then we have that minus 6 sitting out there all by itself equals whatever 354 divided by 2 is. Now, my recommendation is you can do all this by hand, and I guess we will do it all by hand. So over here, I want to point something out. 10x can be rewritten as 20 over 2x. The reason I'm doing that is because I need to have a common denominator with 41 over 2. So I have to rewrite 10x as 20 over 2x. So that's my first thing. 20 over 2x. That's equivalent to 10x plus 41 over 2x minus 6. Okay, what else can we do? We can simplify 354 over 2 because that's going to be a whole number. And so over here in side work, we'll do 354 and we'll divide by 2. 2 goes into 3 one time. That's 2. With 1 as a remainder, bring down the 5. Let's make sure you can actually read that. 2 goes into 15 7 times. 7 times 2 is 14. Okay. 1 as a remainder, bring down the 4. 2 goes into 14 7 times. So 354 divided by 2 is 177. Let's check that. 177 times 2. 7 times 2 is 14, carry the 1. 7 times 2 is 14, plus 1 is 15, carry the 1. And 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3, 354. It works. So that means that this simplified down to 177. All righty. So this is the state of our problem right now. So notice that we have like terms here. We're going to be able to combine these like terms, 20 over 2 and 41 over 2. They have a common denominator, so they can be combined. And so what this is, 20 plus 41 over 2x minus 6 equals 177. Now what? Well, now you can get these terms together by adding 6 to both sides. So we'll add 6 to both sides. This cancels out. And then we can just do a little addition here. 7 plus 6 is 13, carry the 1. 7 plus 1 is 8, and the 1 comes down, 183. All right. We can do a little math problem here. What's 20 plus 41? We can do it in our heads. 41, 51, 61. It's 61 over 2. So we have 61 over 2x equals 183. Look at how far we've come from this long problem down to just this simple thing here. All right. Now, like I said, I'm not going to divide 61 by 2. Instead, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal to over 61 on both sides. So I'll write 183 over 1 times 2 over 61. Okay? Now, the benefit of having done that is these cancel on the left, and suddenly I'm in the remarkable position of having x by itself. And so I just have to figure out this nonsense over here on the right, and I'll be good to go. Well, what is 183 times 2? Because we need to multiply across the top and across the bottom and then simplify. Well, I don't know. So let's go over to side work. And let's do 183 times 2. Well, 3 times 2 is 6. 8 times 2 is 16, carry 1. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. 366. So we have 366 over 61. Okay? Now, here, you either know this or you don't, but if you think about it, you need to think, is this going to be an even divisor, an even quotient rather? And so to get 61, to get this 1 to become a 6, you either need to multiply 61 times 6 or times 11, and it's going to equal 366. So you have to ask yourself, what does 60 times 6 equals? Or 60, is it 61 times 6 equals 366, or is it 61 times 11 equals 366? Well, if we go to the calculator and do 366 divided by 61, we'll see what we get. We get 6, okay? So it makes sense, right? 60 times 6 is 360. So 61 times 6 would be 366. And that's how you do that kind of math in your head, right? If you need to use a calculator, that's fine. So it's x equals 6. 366 divided by 61 equals 6. Alrighty then. So what do we do with this x equals 6? This must be significant, but it's not the answer. Remember what the question was. Let's go back to the question. Look at all this math. It looks so cool. The question was, find the measure of arc QS. So this is it right here, 20x plus 1. So now that we know what x is, we can plug it in to a function defined by f of x. Oops, I want that to be black. F of x equals 20x plus 1. And so we'll evaluate f of x at 6. F of 6 equals 20 times 6 plus 1. All right, so first we have to do 20 times 6. Well, 2 times 6 is 12, so 20 times 6 has to be 120. So that's 120 plus 1 equals 121 degrees. And that is the answer to the question. So that's what you would put in the red box of correctness. Now, to some people, that seems like some kind of a nightmare that you just watched. And to others, that seems like a lot of fun. So that answer would be here, 121. I'm in the camp that finds that fun, and that's probably goes to some length to explain why I'm teaching math. And there are some folks out there who, to the amazement of others, will actually find that interesting. So you're just kind of playing around with algebra. It's all simple algebra, but it all kind of comes together. So we're just going to move this over here, right here. Oops, come back. Right about there. Okay. Now, if we're looking at the next type of question, it's a completely different type of question, but it's still building on that same principle. In this case, we're trying to solve for x and y. And instead of being given arc lengths, we're given interior angle measurements. So I just want to point something out here. This measure of angle Q, okay, plus the measure of angle G, those two angles, if you're looking at the exterior, if you're looking at the arc measurements, so if I'm looking at the arc formed between F and H, and if I'm looking at the opposite side and looking at the arc formed between H and F, the orange line and the green line have to add up to 360 degrees. So I hope it's self-explanatory then that 8y minus 9 has to be equal to half, and half of, if this, whatever h to f is and f to h is, those have to add up to be 360. So what am I trying to say here? What I'm trying to say is, if you add these angles together, if you add this angle to this angle, it has to be equal to half of the arc measurements. Okay, so let's write it out. So the measure of angle Q plus the measure of angle G has to be equal to 1/2 of the total measure of the circle. Okay, because remember, the measure of the arc is twice the measure of the angle. So that would be 1/2 of the total measure of the circle, which is 360 degrees. And half of 360 is 180. So the measure of angle Q, whatever it is, plus the measure of angle G, whatever it is equal to 180. Well, what we have to do here is form a system of equations. So watch this. We're going to take 8y minus 9 and substitute it in for the measure of angle Q. So we'll write 8y minus 9. And then for the measure of angle G, we'll substitute in 8x plus 5. So we'll do plus 8x plus 5. And that's going to be equal to 180. All right, so we can erase this. And now let's focus down on our math. We do have terms that we can combine. So I noticed that we have these constant terms, -9 and +5. And once we combine those together, we can combine it with the 180. So let's just do some simplification. We have 8y, and then -9 plus 5 is -4. So 8y minus 4 plus 8x equals 180. Okay. And now we can combine like terms with the -4 and the 180 by doing plus 4 on both sides, plus 4. Okay, so that cancels out here. And we have 8y plus 8x equals 184. And that's part of our system. Okay, so that's one part of the system. So we can just put that off to the side for a second, which is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to put that off to the side for a moment, and we'll come back and get him in a minute. He'll become useful in a second. So let me zoom out a little bit and just move this over. Okay, so that was one set. Now there's a whole nother set of equation in here, and that's this relationship between H and F. So kind of like opposites here. Just like the other one, we have the measure of angle H. And you could think about this arc here all the way from Q over to G. That corresponds to the measure of angle H. That's going to be half of the circle. And then you have the measure of angle F over here. Okay. And that's going to correspond to the other half of the circle. So taken together, they have to add up to 360. So their interior angles, the composite angles that give us these arc measures, have to be half of the total arc measure. So the total arc measure is 360, so half the arc measure is 180. So these two angles have to add up to be 180. So the measure of angle H, we'll write it out. The measure of angle H plus the measure of angle F have to equal 180, which is half of 360. Okay, so let's just substitute in those algebraic expressions. So for the measure of angle H, we'll do 4y plus 7. 4y plus 7. I'm getting that from right here. And then for F, I'll do 14x plus 1. So plus 14x plus 1 equals 180. And now we're zooming in on this. Well, let's see what we can combine. We can combine the 7 with the 1, and then we can work on that 180. So I've got 4y, and then 7 plus 1 is 8, so plus 8 plus 14x equals 180. And now I can subtract 8 from both sides. And I have 4y plus 14x equals 172. Okay, so there's another system, all right? So you've got two equations that can, if you put them together, it forms a system. So we've got these two equations that can be brought together to form a system. One of the equations is 4y plus 14x equals 172. And the other equation is 8y plus 8x equals 184. Okay, so let's bring those together and write a system of two linear equations. So here's our system. We have 4y plus 14x equals 172. And under that, we have 8y plus 8x equals 184. Okay, so we're going to solve this system using either elimination or substitution. And everybody, I think, universally agrees that elimination is easier. And so we will do that. Now, we want to eliminate a variable, but we can't yet. We have to do something to one of the equations. So I think I'm going to try to eliminate the y. And so what would I need to do to this 4 in order to make it into an 8? Well, I'd have to multiply it by 2. But if I'm going to do that, I have to multiply the entire top by 2. So I'm going to multiply the entire top by 2 in order to turn that 4 into an 8. And that's going to be distributed to each term of the top equation. Okay? So let's do that math. We're going to rewrite this. 2 times 4 is 8. So we have here, we'll get rid of this and we'll write our new equation underneath this. So 2 times 4 is 8. So it's 8y. 2 times 14 is 28 plus 28x. And we have equals 172 times 2. I'm not really sure. Okay. Some people can do that in their head and I can't. 2 times 2 is 4. 7 times 2 is 14. Carry the 1. 2 times 1 is 2 plus 1 is 3. 344. So I have 344. And I think I'm going to eliminate by subtraction. And so it's going to be in my interest to bring this equation down beneath the other one. Okay. So this is what I want to do. I want to use elimination by subtraction. Okay, so we have here this system, and we're just going to subtract. So be careful when you do subtraction. You have to distribute that subtraction symbol as you subtract, and we'll go through it. So the fun part is easy. 8y minus 8y is 0, so those eliminate. You eliminated the y variable. And now we're going to do 28x minus 8x. That's 28x, and then you always have to refer to this minus sign. So you go like 28x minus 8x is 20x equals 344 minus 184. Well, we got to do that. 344 minus 184. Well, 4 minus 4 is 0. Here I have to borrow. And 8 from 14 is 6. And 2 minus 1 is 1. So 160. So 20x equals 160. All right. So one thing I can do is just cross out the zeros. And now I have 2x equals 16. Divide both sides by 2. Cancel, cancel. And I have x equals 8. So now I know what x is. And remember, when you're solving a system of equations, once you find out what one of the letters equals, you can substitute that back into one of your original equations and solve for the other variable. So now I know that x equals 8. So I think I'll substitute that back into this equation over here. I know that x equals 8. So I'll go over here and I'll write 8y plus 8 times 8 equals 184. So I have 8y plus 8 times 8, 64, equals 184. Subtract 64 from both sides. Cancel. 8y equals, subtract. Okay, so 4 minus 4 is 0. 8 minus 6 is 2. And the 1. Okay, so we have to do 120 divided by 8. Let's do that math over here. 120 divided by 8. 8 goes into 12 one time. 1 times 8 is 8. And that's 4. Bring down the 0. 8 goes into 45 times. So 120 divided by 8 is 15. Y equals 15. If we're going to express our answers, these are our two answers. X equals 8 and y equals 15. So we'll write that like this. We'll write it like this. Okay. X comma y. 8 comma 15. All right. So this is X and this is Y. And we'll put that in the red box of correctness, since that is what we think the answer is. And let's go see if that was one of our answer choices. X equals 8, Y equals 15. Look at that. It's answer choice B. All right. So that is how you do these problems. So I hope this has been a good introduction. This is a lot of fun. This is an assignment that can really get your intellectual juices flowing. So I hope that you find it helpful. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please make sure to give the video a like. And if you have not already, subscribe to the channel. Make sure to hit that notification bell so you're always alerted when I release new videos. Thank you.